Bismillah Rahman Rahim. So today we are going to start our next topic, and the presentation I have already shared with you guys on the WhatsApp group. The topic is Introduction to Metabolism. As you guys are aware of the fact that the courses 311 and 312 both are introductory biochemistry, where you will get the basic understanding about biomolecules and a basic understanding about the metabolism as well, and how it goes, with a little bit of understanding of nutrition as well. Because in your second year courses of 411 and 412, what you are going to study is all about metabolism. So, one of the topic that we are going to cover today is an overview of what metabolism is, giving you a rough idea so that in your next level courses of 411 and 412, as I said, that you all will be going through the metabolism of different biomolecules that you have studied in 311 and 312. So let's start to define the metabolism and its relationship with energy and life. We know that all the chemical reactions, all the chemical pathways going on within the cell are essential for life. And somehow we can say that these chemical reactions going on within the cell are the integral part for the maintenance of the life to get all the properties which a living organism possess. In short, all these chemical reactions, all these chemical pathways that are going on within the cell or within the organism, they are being referred as metabolic pathway. Now, the next thing is that why we have these metabolic pathways going on within the cell, and what is its relationship with life. So the answer to this question is that organisms, they need to transform energy. And why energy is needed? We all know that in order to carry out all activities, a living organism must require energy. So it's a process of energy transformation, where one form of energy is going to be transformed into another form of energy. So we as organism and other organisms, what they're doing is we are transforming energy. And you guys have already got an idea about the first law of thermodynamics, which states that energy can neither be created nor it can be destroyed, but can change from one form to another. So it's not about you know creating energy or destroying energy, it's about transforming energy. And in order to transform energy, the best way to transform is via chemical reaction, and that is what metabolism is. So the energy transformation of life, it's related with the laws of the thermodynamics. And as I stated, one law, we'll be discussing about other laws of the thermodynamics in this lecture later on. So all energy transformations of the life are governed by or ruled by the laws of thermodynamics. So as I said, that the life itself relies on energy. So in other way, organisms live at the expense of the energy. When it comes to energy, the most common molecule that came into our consideration is ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is being referred to as the currency of energy. So if you need energy to carry out any of the activity, you need a ready-made source of energy, and the ready-made source of energy in most of the cases within the cell is ATP. So we call ATP as the currency molecule which powers all cellular work by coupling exergonic reactions to endergonic reactions. So we'll go in the a little bit of detail about these exergonic and endergonic reactions. But just to let you know that it's the same that you study in chemistry as exothermic and endothermic. But in biological sciences within the cell, we have a separate term for this exo and endothermic as exergonic and endergonic reactions. Now, look at this diagram, and this diagram is not to show you or to upset you, but to let you know that how complicated the metabolic pathways are. Now, this is a picture where uh, we only show the first two steps of the catabolic pathway of glucose, and you can see that how complicated that metabolic pathway is, and it's very difficult to figure out like from where we have to start and where we are ending because it's going in every direction. You might get a picture in other textbook of the biochemistry which gives you an idea about all the cellular metabolic pathways in one picture. So it's a pretty complicated mechanism, and it's a pretty sophisticated mechanism as well. So just to give you an idea that how sophisticated this mechanism of metabolic pathway occurs in the cell, and that's an example of just one molecule. And you can see on the right hand side here, it shows that glucose is undergoing the transformation, and there are only two stages shown here because we're not studying about metabolism in detail at this stage. And as I said, that you guys will be studying the metabolism in your next classes. But by looking at this picture, ऐसा नहीं हो कि आप लोग मेटाबॉलिज्म को लेके परेशान हो जाएं. That's very interesting as well. It's very interesting to study about metabolism, but just it's an indication that it's a complicated and a sophisticated process. Okay, still people keep coming in late. I don't know how I can explain you that there is a time to enter the class, but nevertheless, okay. Now, in order to carry out the metabolic pathways, or in short, in order to carry out the reactions within the cell, we need enzymes. And enzymes are being defined as the molecules which are required to catalyze the reactions within the cell. They're just like catalyst when you talk about chemistry, but in the biological system, we call them enzymes. So enzymes are the one which play a very very crucial role when it comes to the metabolism, and they are not only required to carry out the metabolic reactions, but they are also responsible for their regulation and balance of supply and demand. The balance of supply and demand is like if uh, a compound A is being transformed into B and a compound B transformed into compound C in the body. It depends that how much of the compound C is needed and how much of the compound A we do have. So there should be a balance of a supply and demand, and that's how the metabolic pathways are regulated, and enzymes play a crucial role in that regulation. We divide metabolic pathways in two categories as catabolic pathway and anabolic pathway. Catabolic pathway, they are the reactions which release energy by the breakdown of the complex molecule to simpler molecules. Like you have carbs, you have proteins, you have lipids, all these kind of complex molecules, and they've been broken down into their simpler molecules or into their basic monomers. And that breakdown process from the bigger molecule to the smaller molecule is being referred to as catabolic pathway. And for sure, when we have this catabolic pathway, we do have the release of energy because of this breakdown. And whatever energy is released during these catabolic reactions will be stored in the cell until we need that energy to carry out the functions. As I mentioned in the previous slide, one example is ATP. On the other hand, we have anabolic pathways, which are just opposite to the catabolic one. The anabolic pathways are the one that consume energy, which is being produced in the first step here, in order to build complicated or complex molecule from simpler compounds. So it's just the reverse of the catabolic pathway, where we have smaller monomeric units and we use them to build up the molecules, the bigger molecule, the complicated molecules, for example, from amino acids to protein, from glucose to glycogen or starch, etc., etc. The energy released by catabolic pathway is the source which drive the anabolic pathway. So now you've got an understanding that within the cell, the energy transformation is going on. You can see that it's not, we're not creating energy or we're not destroying energy. Rather, it's energy transformation. And we have energy, coming in from catabolic pathways and then energy being utilized, in the anabolic pathways. So, as I said, that it's all the drama of energy transformation, and that's what you can say, is the core of metabolism, the core of the metabolic pathways. Now, how we define energy? It's very simple. Like energy is being defined as the capacity to do work, any kind of work, or to move matter against opposing force. Like if we have a block lying on the floor and we want to push that against the friction, we need energy. So anything where you have to move something against a force, or in short, a capacity to do work, is being referred as energy. Now, energy could be of different type, but most importantly, what we are going to study here is about kinetic energy and potential energy. Kinetic energy is that particular form of the energy which is present in a body when the body is in motion. So anything in motion would have that kinetic energy, like photons, heat, etc., etc. While potential energy is the one, that is the energy that matters when something is in a stationary position or at a location somewhere. That's being referred to as potential energy. So again, there is no one time where we can say that kinetic energy is totally finished or potential energy is totally finished. It's just again energy transformation. So, for example, if an object is lying stationary on a table, it has got potential energy. But when you move this object up, that means this potential energy is going to transform into kinetic energy, and so on and so forth. So it's again, I'm focusing on this point again and again, that it's all energy transformation. So, what is the chemical energy? Chemical energy is a form of potential energy in a molecule because of the arrangement of the atoms. For example, we have glucose, and glucose have got 6 carbon, 12 hydrogen, and 6 oxygen, and they have a particular arrangement. So, this particular arrangement of the carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and their bonding would have some energy within that, and that is what the chemical energy refers to. So, going further in detail, energy can be converted from one form to another, as I mentioned earlier. And this is the picture where the boy climbs the ladder at the top of the slide. That is, he's converting his kinetic energy to potential energy. Now, as he slides down, the potential energy is now converted back to kinetic energy. And by the end of the slide, again, that kinetic energy will be transformed into potential energy. So that's how we are converting one form of energy to another form of energy. So similarly, in case of the food, it's the potential energy in the form of chemical energy within the food that we have eaten, and then from that food, we got the energy through the catabolic pathways. Then this energy is being utilized by your body for the anabolic reactions to synthesize protein, to synthesize larger molecules, etc., etc. The term cellular respiration is a term used for the reactions going on within the cell, because there is another part of respiration which is outside the cell, which is normally the called as inhalation and exhalation. So the oxygen is being inhaled, but the purpose of this oxygen which we inhaled is to be transported to the cell through the blood. And once this is in the cell and it performs the reaction, that is what we call the cellular respiration. So, cellular respiration and other catabolic pathways are the primary source of energy, which is stored in the food molecules like sugar and others. This energy is available for all kind of cellular activities and work, and also this energy, as I said, will be stored in the form of ATPs as well. So the chemical energy which is in the molecules, in the organic molecules, is actually derived from the light energy, which is primarily coming from the plants. So plants, by the process of photosynthesis, they capture the sun energy, which is enormous form of energy, and transform that into starch and other molecules by the process of photosynthesis. And then we took that starch directly from the plants, or the plants are being taken up by herbivores, and then we take the animal meat. So it's all transformation of the energy. So the central property of living organism is actually lying in the ability to transform energy, and that's what I mentioned in the very first slide. Now, as I said, that all energy transformation in our body are governed by two laws of thermodynamics. And thermodynamic is a branch of science that deals with the study of energy transformation. And that's not only important in the living cell, but it's important in outside the cell as well, in the chemical lab as well. All the chemical reactions that we do in the chemical labs are also governed by the laws of thermodynamics. So the term system here in thermodynamic refers to something which is under observation, under consideration, and what is left is called surrounding. So, for example, if we are looking at how the reactions go in a cell, then the cell will be called as system, and the rest of the body will be called as surrounding. And we know that system and surrounding, they affect each other. So energy can move from system to surrounding, and vice versa from surrounding to system. And that's how they affect each other. A closed system in a thermodynamics term is being defined as like a liquid in a thermos, or you call it an isolated system. Technically speaking, it's not 100% isolated. Uh, when you keep a very warm or a hot liquid in a thermos, it would remain hot for a longer time. Why? Because you try to make it a closed system, and you don't want the energy to move out of the system to the surrounding. But what will happen after 6 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours, depending upon the quality of the thermos, the liquid will be cold. So that shows that it's not 100% closed. There is a release of energy going on, but slowly going on. And that's how you call it an isolated system or a closed system. Now, unlike closed system, in an open system, there is no restriction of energy transformation between system and surrounding. So you have a cup of tea and you put it on the table. That's a closed system where the free movement of energy is going on. So we as organisms are in the open system. And in this case, we absorb energy, light or chemical energy in the form of organic molecules, and we also release energy in the form of the heat and metabolic waste products. So that's how we as organisms are living in an open system where energy is moving from surrounding to the system, and then from system to the surrounding. Now, what is the first law of thermodynamics, which I already stated in the beginning of my lecture? The first law of thermodynamics is very, very common, and you guys have already studied about that, which states that energy can be transferred and transformed, but it cannot be created or destroyed. And you see that first law of thermodynamics everywhere in the nature. As I just mentioned earlier, that the you know non ending source of energy for our ecosystem is sun. So the energy which is in the sun is being taken up by the plants to transform that light into a chemical energy, which is a starch in most of the cases, by using the process of photosynthesis. So in reality, the plants are not producing energy. The plants are actually transforming energy. And then from, as I said, from the plants directly to us or to herbivores, and from herbivores, animals to us. So that's how it's all transformation of energy going on. And that's what the first law of thermodynamics states. The second law of thermodynamics states that every energy transformation must make the universe more disordered. And here comes the term entropy. Now, how to explain this? In order to understand this, you must understand that energy is inversely proportional to stability. Like, in short, more the energy, more will be the instability, and vice versa. If you've got a less energy, then it's more stable. Now, there are many examples in our daily life which can explain this phenomenon. Anything that lying on the table is stable. When you push or put some energy on that, it starts moving. And as long as it starts moving, it's become unstable. So that's how when you have got energy, the things become unstable. You have studied that phenomenon in chemistry as when the electrons absorb energy, they become excited. And excited electrons are unstable. So they try to become stable by releasing that energy. So that's how you understand that energy and stability are inversely related. And that's what the entropy is. Entropy is the measure of disorderness or randomness. So when you give energy to a molecule, the molecule will absorb energy. And as a result of that, its entropy increase, which is the disorderness. So the more random a collection of matter, the greater its entropy. The less, then the lesser the entropy. So much of the increased entropy of the universe takes the form of increasing heat, which is the energy of random molecular motion. Like when you provide energy to a molecule, it gains energy, it becomes unstable, it increases the motion, and as a result of this, the heat energy is produced, which is going back to the surrounding, and that's again the energy transformation. So the second law of thermodynamics states that every single transformation must make the universe more disordered. And again, it's all about the transformation. In most energy transformations, ordered form of energy are partly converted to heat. As I just mentioned, that when you give energy to something, it becomes more disordered, it becomes more vibrant, it increases more, and then it produces the heat, and heat is going back to the surrounding. For example, automobiles is one example. They convert about 25% of the energy in the gasoline into motion. The rest is lost as heat. So whatever fuel we use in the vehicles, the amount of energy we are using actually to move the car is only 25%, while the 75% of that energy of the fuel burning is going as heat, and it's going back to the environment. That's why it's impacting the environment. Living cells unavoidably convert organized form of energy to heat. Like for us, it's not like automobiles where a huge amount of heat is being lost in the surrounding. We are not like this. So the metabolic breakdown of the food ultimately released as heat, though some of it is diverted temporarily to perform work in the organism. So what energy we get from the catabolism, part of that is transformed into heat, and part of it is being utilized by our body to perform our different functions. So organism, they live at the expense of the free energy. Our survival is actually based on the amount of the free energy we have. What the free energy is? The energy which is available for us, the energy which is accessible to us in order to perform the function. So uh, in chemistry, in general, the reactions are of two categories you must have studied: is spontaneous and non-spontaneous. And the term itself is self-explanatory. Spontaneous processes are the one that occur without any help. So Any kind of processes, any kind of work which doesn't require any initiation will be called as spontaneous processes. While in contrast, the non-spontaneous processes are the one that can only occur if you provide the energy. If you do not provide, they don't occur. So spontaneous processes actually increase the stability of a system, and a non-spontaneous process decrease the stability. Why? Because in the non-spontaneous processes, you are providing energy, and as I said, energy is inversely proportional to stability. While in case of spontaneous processes, they increase the stability of the system. Why? Because they are releasing energy. So a free energy is being defined as the portion of a system energy that is available or that is able to perform work when temperature is uniform throughout the system. So our entire metabolism in the cell is actually relying on that free energy content, that how much energy is available or how much energy is accessible to us to perform the work. So the free energy is mentioned as G in the biological system, and the total energy is referred to as H, and the entropy is related from S. So if we look at the relationship that and T is the temperature, which is in the Kelvin unit. So for a system to be a spontaneous system, for a system which doesn't require the input of energy, it is spontaneous. The system must either give up energy because it's already has got a good amount of energy. That's why it's unstable. That's why it's spontaneous. So it will give up energy. That means decrease in H, and give up order. Definitely, when energy goes out, that means the disorderness goes out, and that decreases the entropy. So any system which is spontaneous must have enormous energy, and that's why it's unstable. So the spontaneous system will release energy, and as a result of that, it increases stability or decreases entropy. So in order to find out the change in this free energy, which is delta G, it must be negative. So for all spontaneous reaction, the delta G will be negative, which shows that it is a spontaneous reaction. While just reciprocally, if you look at the non-spontaneous reaction where you have to provide energy in order to carry out the reaction, the delta G will be positive. So this delta G is a very important marker. And remember, in your next 2 semesters, when you study the metabolism, you will find out everywhere in the biological system, the chemical reactions would have the delta G values. And you should look at those delta G values, that if it's in minus, it shows a spontaneous reaction. And if the delta G value is in positive, that shows that it is a non-spontaneous reaction where you have to provide energy. So this is a very, very important indicator to find out if a reaction is spontaneous or non-spontaneous. Now, this diagram shows you some of this, which I explained now. Chemical reactions, we know that in general chemistry, we call them exothermic and endothermic, and in biological sciences, we call them exergonic and entergonic. So there is no difference at all, it's just the term different. Now, from exergonic reaction, I think this picture is pretty much self-explanatory. You can see that the reactants, they already have a higher energy. This side we have potential energy. So they are at a high energy level, which clearly indicates that they are unstable. And anything that is unstable tend to become stable by the natural law. So this reactant want to lose some energy in order to be transformed into the product, which is much more stable, as you can see. So in order to do this transformation from the reactant to the product, obviously the energy is going to release. So you can see that amount of energy output. And this is the progress of the reaction. So this is a typical example of exergonic reaction, and the energy released will be measured as delta G, and which will be lesser than 0. That means it will be in minus, as I said. So for hexagonic reaction, the delta G value will be in the negative, and that is what we call a spontaneous reaction. In another term, unlike this, we have endergonic reaction, which is just opposite, and you can see that reactants are at a low energy level and products are at a high energy level. Now, these reactions don't occur spontaneous because reactant don't want to be converted into a product with a high energy because that's unstable. Now, in order to do that reaction, you have to provide energy. And that particular amount of energy will transform that reactant into a high energy state of product. And in this case, they are non-spontaneous and the delta G will be positive, and we call them endergonic reactions. So as I said, make sure to remember that the metabolic pathways, you will find out these two kind of reaction, and by looking at delta G, you can understand that that reaction is spontaneous or non-spontaneous. Okay, going further and coming back to the last part of the presentation for today is ATP. A little bit of understanding of ATP, as I already mentioned, that ATP is the powerhouse of the cell, the most adaptable form of the energy molecule in which the energy is saved and can be utilized whenever it is needed. So a cell does three main kinds of the work. We divide them into three categories: mechanical work, transport work, and chemical work. Now, in terms of the mechanical work, like for example, beating of the cilia, some cells have got a ciliary particles on the side and they do the movement. So for that movement, they have cilia, and that cilia will allow them to move. Contraction of the muscle cells, movement of the chromosomes within the cell, within the nucleus. These are all examples of mechanical work, and that requires energy. Then we have the transport work, like pumping something from across the membrane against the direction of spontaneous movement. Like, you know, particles move from higher to lower concentration. That's a normal phenomenon. But if you have to move from lower to higher concentration, that's against the phenomenon, and you need energy for that. And that's what we call the transport. That requires energy. Then we have chemical sort of energy work, like, you know, driving endergonic reactions such as synthesis of polymers from the monomers, like from glucose to glycogen, from amino acids to proteins, etc., etc., and from nucleotides to polynucleotides that you have already studied, and you have seen, these kind of things are energy driven. This is the structure of the ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and you can see that we have a 5 carbon sugar here, ribose. We have a nitrogenous base, which is adenine, and we have 3 phosphate group. Now, these phosphate groups are actually the source of energy. The breakdown of these bonds sequentially or altogether will release enormous amount of energy. So actual energy portion of the ATP is in these phosphate groups. So as I said, that they can undergo sequential breakdown, like ATP can be broken down to ADP, and then from ADP to AMP and so on. And in some cases, it might undergo complete breakdown by removing all the phosphate groups as well. So depending upon what sort of energy is needed in the reactions. And this is another example where the bond breakdown is being shown. And you can see that hydrolysis of the N phosphate group from adenosine diphosphate, like from ATP to ADP, and then this phosphate is released, and then this gives you 7.3 kilocalorie of energy per mole of the ATP under a standard condition. And if you go on like from ADP to AMP and then carry on, you got more and more energy coming in from this breakdown. So ATP is being defined as a renewable resource which is continuously regenerated and utilized. Like on one side, because of the catabolic reactions, whatever energy is being produced is being stored as ATP, and on the other case, the ATP are being utilized wherever the energy is needed. So it's a kind of a renewable resource. So the energy to support renewable comes from the catabolic reactions, as I said. In a working cell, muscle cell, the entire pool of the ATP is recycled once each minute. So you see how quickly the recycling process of ATP is going on, because we are utilizing ATPs continuously as well. So that's why we have to replenish them as well. So over 10 million ATP consumed and regenerated per second per cell. Now look at this stats. Per second per cell, we have over 10 million of ATP molecules continuously consumed and regenerated. So the regeneration is an endergonic process, and breakdown is an exergonic process. So it requires, so for regeneration, it requires energy, which I already mentioned is 7.3 kilocalorie. And when it's broken down, we got the same energy released, which is 7.3 kilocalorie per mole. So that's how the reactions are coupled. So this is a very simple picture just to explain you that on one side we have energy from catabolism, which is being utilized here. We have already ADP and pi, and they are combined to form ATP. When this ATP is broken down for the cellular work, then this is transformed back to ADP and pi, and the energy is released. So with this, we have completed today's lecture, and I am going to allow you guys for any sort of questions. If you have, just let me know or raise your hand if you have got any question, and then I will answer you the questions. If you don't have question at this stage, you can go through the lecture again. The presentation has already been shared on the group. You can go through that as well and can ask the question at a later stage if you want. But if you have any question, just raise your hand. There is no question, so I think I'm going to finish the class. But I think you guys really need a physical class so that I might ask the question with you if you guys are not in a position to ask the question. But let's see when it comes to reality. So I'm going to end up the class, and inshallah, the recording will be provided to you after the class, and then we'll meet you in the next class, inshallah. Thank you very much. Take care for the office.